Yeah, go for it, I think.
Lights, camera, action. We're back for your satisfaction from Action Business Furniture Studios is where it's happening. We have a special guest star appearance today from Jennifer Hawkins of Launch Performance. Be sure to engage with the video in the comments below, like, and check us out on Facebook. And last but not least, your host, here's Johnny.
All right.
Who was that man?
Who is that man? Dynamite Mike. Welcome to Friday Conversations, everybody. Thanks for being here. We got some great people around the table, and hopefully you are tuning in, and we'll look for your comments and questions. Let's start like we always do. Let's have some introductions. To my left.
All right, Robert Reuter with IDIC Designs, Infinite Diversity and Infinite Combinations. Hey, if you are struggling with your technology and you need to get better results and better time, check in with me. I'd be happy to sit down and find out how we can help you be more effective.
I'm Jennifer Hawkins with Launch Performance, as you've already heard. And I work with specifically in career and development for our young adults, so graduates all the way up through mid-level leaders, really working on their coaching, development, leadership skills, and how to find clarity and land that dream role. So love what I do, have a passion for young adults. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you. My mortgage Mandy. So a lot of people first think of the real estate agent when they're going on that journey. And I'm here to help you find the money, which is equally as important, maybe just not as thrilling. But there's a lot of other strategies that are very important, especially in this kind of climate where we're having highest amount of car repos. We are having the highest record of credit card debt. All of these things can be easily solved by tapping into your greatest investment, which is typically your home and your equity. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't think of that until they've actually gotten themselves into a pickle, which is typically then when I can't approve you. So reach out proactively and just make sure that you know what your options are and have a good strategy in place for whatever will meet your needs. And I love to have good brainstorms, so reach out if I can be helpful.
Hello, I'm Zane. I'm with Zebra Go. We are a fully managed CRM platform for small business owners, small service-based businesses that go out and do appointments. We answer the calls while you're working so you don't have to, and get people on your schedule and let you have a life again. So.
Very nice.
Mandy.
Yes.
Isn't it also true that if they go through you, that it's going to be a smaller interest rate?
Well, we have very, very competitive interest rates, yes, and that's a very big deal. But I think even bigger of a deal, rather than kind of fighting for that 10th of a point, because typically we're all pretty much in the same ballpark, is really finding partnership, because this is a very stressful situation. It lasts typically a month or longer, so you're gonna have a lot of conversations. So you really want to make sure that you're building the right team. And it's somebody that you feel confident in and that you could have stressful conversations and feel like you're getting the proper resolution.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello, I'm Dave Ribble from Standout Marketing Strategies and Standout Mastery. And what we do is we teach and coach folks who are very, very good at what they do. They're just a little bit nervous about being in front of other people or meeting people. So we focus on communication and connection and collaboration, all those 3 C's that we like to call, that have to do with the fact that you want to be respected, you want to be somebody that accounts for something, that you want to be, you have a voice, you want to be heard. I know that because I'm just like that myself. So what we do is we teach and train and coach and encourage and have a heck of a lot of fun. The 26th is tomorrow. If you haven't heard about it yet, we're doing Standout Mastery Summit, and that is going to be 10 to 4. And we're going to do a lot of brainstorming, a lot of coaching, a lot of breakouts, and have a heck of a good time doing it. I'm even feeding you. I don't know how I got into that, but I'm doing that too. Dave Ribble, Standout Mastery. Hope you can come tomorrow.
Looking forward to it. Sounds like it's going to be exciting.
Thank you.
Lisa Miller. I am an arbitrator and a private judge and administrative hearing officer. I provide our Lisa Miller's Legal Minute. So let's set that timer.
Yes.
Today we're going to talk about due process. We hear about it all the time, and what really is it? People don't realize it's two things. There's procedural due process and substantive due process. Substantive due process protects fundamental rights. Procedural due process is what most of us are thinking about. It's notice and an opportunity to be heard. So it applies in both civil and criminal because it's that important. It's one of the bedrock sort of bases for all of our procedures whenever anything is going to be either court or feel like court. It could be an administrative procedure, but due process still bedrock. So there's some interesting cases on it in administrative proceedings because all of us operate in highly regulated environments. We are all subject to, especially, right, mortgage mandate, right?
Yeah.
You're incredibly regulated. How many inches of paper do you have to have signed? And that's all just regulations. That's not inherent to the process of getting someone financed. That's just hoo-ha regulation requirements.
Every year.
Right, and it gets worse all the time.
Yeah.
So the administrative state is expanding, which means that regulations are expanding. There's more of them, and there's more money in enforcement and so forth. So regarding administrative proceedings, there was an interesting case not too long ago, Axon, and the Supreme Court decided that for a constitutional challenge, not you're misreading the regulation, but for a constitutional challenge, which would be a due process challenge or something along those lines, you don't have to wait for the agency to make a mistake, issue a decision, and then you go to court. They tell you they're going to do it, you think they're going to do it wrong, whatever the enforcement is on you, and you can take your constitutional challenge directly to court, no waiting around, no exhaustion of remedies. So it's a real end run around a lot of administrative procedures, and it's very valuable because if you can win on your constitutional challenge, all the administrative stuff just falls to the wayside.
Awesome.
Right, and you have, I think, a better chance because you don't have the expert in that program as your judge. You have a judge who knows a little bit about your program but wants to be educated by both sides. So it's a different experience, more expensive, but you know, you can elect which arguments you want to pursue. And then regarding a new case this year that a lot of people are talking about, undue prejudice can interfere with due process. So if evidence is introduced and the judge lets it in, that is so prejudicial that it renders the proceeding unfair, that is a violation of due process. And that's what happened in Andrew v. White. There was an admission of evidence that was just so prejudicial that it tainted the entire proceeding. You couldn't get a fair trial, and that is now considered a violation of due process. And then lastly, we hear a lot about due process in the context of immigration. And right, that's what is mostly what is in the news right this minute. And one of the interesting things about immigration is this sort of wrinkle in due process. In the immigration field, the government has more sway. They have more authority. It's not a regular, even playing field based on the law up to this minute. And it may change. You know, there may be some litigation that refutes that, but based on the composition of the court, it seems very unlikely. But just know when you're reading the news about immigration, deportations, and in the context of due process, that deportations, the Department of State, the Department of Justice, they have more authority than you realize because it's more so than what would ordinarily be in place in a due process setting. So what it means for all of us, because we're all, whether we like it or not, we're in this very regulated environment, it's just modern life, is to stay engaged. And this goes back to a speaker that you put on 2 weeks ago about we should be engaged in the process and
Right.
sponsoring our own bills and
Yeah.
in touch, right? So we need to stay engaged with the legislative process. We need to try to shape the legislative process. And this group has special knowledge because of that wonderful presentation.
Yeah.
And to be involved in lobbying. So let's all keep that in mind to try to push back against this sort of government overreach. That's, you know, due process is our protection against excessive regulation or the government overreaching or overstepping. So there's two interesting cases coming up that I'll watch for.
Let's keep that maybe for next week.
Oh, okay.
Mike, I know you've got an event tonight.
Tonight at 6 p.m. But aside from that, we have
Oh, He's not on the camera because the camera didn't pick him up. He's saluting the flag and playing.
Shouldn't we all be?
I'm not sure where Mike's going with this. You gotta say something so the camera will pick you up.
America!
You want to tell us about your event, Mike?
Yeah, it's at 6 tonight, Steam Plan. 6 to 9
All right.
in the wine cellar room.
All about AI, right?
Yep.
Yep.
See ya.
Okay. Awesome. And John.
Hey, how's it going? Sorry I ran in late. I was rushing. But we had a lunch today that was over at Burberry Workspaces. Phenomenal turnout. We had a really great group. Next month, we have an AI workshop that's coming up. My name is John Hansman with Truett at IT management firm. We do IT, cybersecurity, and now full AI consulting for businesses to help them navigate the security side, the implementation side, and how to get your employees to actually use it side. So, yeah, super excited. You can find details on our website.
All right.
That's all I'm going to say.
Awesome. Welcome. All right, everybody, thank you. I'm Jonathan Byron. I'm the host and realtor in the group. At least today I'm the only realtor. Sometimes we have other realtors. We try to shoo them away. Just
They're,
kidding.
they're everywhere.
They're everywhere. There are a lot of us out there. So if you know somebody that is thinking about buying a house, let me and Mandy help them. That's all I'll say about that. Jen, I don't want to step on what you're bringing, but I did want to introduce a little bit. You and I have had some conversations. I'm so pumped about this conversation. I'm very excited. I want to kind of point out for people, some of us, like Mandy and I, we don't have a huge team structure. And so while this is directed at people that are promoting within an organization, the stuff we're going to be talking about applies to all of us.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like super excited to hear what you have. And I want to make sure anybody that's, you know, tuning into this doesn't just jump out because it's like, oh, I don't have a big company. This is for all of us. How do we train people in our lives? And
Yes.
that I actually had a conversation
Love it.
yesterday. I was like, oh, this is so good. So I'm going to let you take it away, Jennifer. Tell us what we need to know.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. So I wanted to really chat today about, you know, that new leader to that mid-level leader, right? And this really falls within a certain typically, you know, kind of age group that's usually landing in these roles. And that is, you know, kind of that mid to late 20s when they start maybe to that early 30-year-old time frame. And what we're finding, and just to quote some statistics for you, 60% of new managers report receiving no formal training when transitioning into their first leadership role. That is a large number of people, right? That really never get what they need. And, you know, to think that it's just going to happen through osmosis, right? It doesn't. And the skill sets that really get them there are not the skill sets that they need to be effective. And so as I look around the table, you know, we really do have folks here who either are servant leaders within their community, right? Or have some kind of leadership influence and that sort of thing. And how do we help those around us, right? Because companies really have stepped away from doing that. And then another statistics, 82% of managers consider themselves accidental managers, having had no formal leadership or management training, which really gets us to that 67% of employees are unengaged, according to the most recent Gallup poll. That too is a staggering number, right? And so we, you know, feel that when we go to different places, right? You can feel when employees are unengaged. You can hear it in the service levels, right?
Yeah.
You feel it. You're not getting that service that you're looking for, the way people approach you and that sort of thing. And it really is that leader that's going to help those employees, right, have what they need, the tools, right? The influence, the understanding of the vision, how they impact, how they show up at work, and the things that they're doing. And so if our leaders don't really know how to do that, where are our employees going to get that from? And we have touched on this a bit over the last few weeks, right? This kind of this like overarching umbrella keeps kind of coming up for us in some of our conversations as we talk about business and, you know, how we impact our community and things like that. I will tell you today, I had a dialogue, one of my clients brought up, you know, in my new role that I'm going to have, I'm a VP of sales. I'm only going to have one direct report. So I'm really not going to have this opportunity to like coach the way that I was. It's going to be like this void a bit because this is something that I really love to do. And I said, I will challenge you that we have an opportunity, which is going to lead into what you were just talking about, in our lives and in our work, to impact those people around us really and develop them and help them, right? And how do we guide and what can we do? So yes, my organization specifically is dealing with that new and mid-level leader, walking them through how to coach and develop, walking them through how to be leaders, right? And influence, right? And do those kinds of things, set the vision and do all of that. But we, as, you know, folks that have been around for a while, right? Have business acumen, have connections, have been in our community, really have an opportunity to begin mentorship with, you know, with our young adults. And what does that look like? Last week we were getting into the conversation, right, of, you know, just talking to our kids, for example, about how you show up, right? Your energy levels, right? Do you even know how to hold that dialogue, a conversation? Do you know how to shake hands when you meet someone for the first time, right? Those are all things that we are really missing, and that we, you know, as we're not elders, but we're definitely more mature, right? Who have been around and we have that business acumen and we really have, you know, that knowledge can make impact and influence. So today I wanted us to think about what are opportunities, right, that we have in our world, you know, and start to ask each other some questions about where we might find, right, that we can begin to do that. So I just want to know, is anyone here, have you mentored before? Have you literally taken someone under your wing and really worked with them to help them, whether that's, you know, do better in their career, right? Maybe scale in their career, maybe land a role, that sort of thing. And how did you find them, or did they find you? What did that look like?
Great question.
That's an open question to the table.
Yes, please.
That's what I do.
So let's talk about that, right? So are they seeking you out? Are you seeking them out? Right? Because I think Lisa, we were talking last week, it was like, well, how do you find people to mentor? Like, what does that look like, right? And so there's such a great need, but we don't always know how to connect and make it happen. So I think that today a great opportunity for us is to think about how we can walk away with action items where we could really find that younger person in our lives and make an impact, right? Because when you get to a certain level in your world or a certain age or whatever, you really start to flip, right? And then you're starting to develop other people around you and you see the world for what it can be. And then your impact in your role within the world to do that, whether that's at work, right? Whether that's through community service, however it is, we need to begin to really double down on this and develop people. One of the things that we talked about, Lisa, was COVID, right? And the impact. People lost that interconnection, right? And then our younger folks were really impacted by that because they were holed up for several years. They were really informative years. So how are we doing that? So you said, I already do that. That's what I do all the time. How are you finding people, or how are they finding you? What does that look like?
I go to networking events and I join networking groups and I put information on social media, and I also just do word of mouth through a lot of professionals that I've worked with for a long time.
So do you have like a few, like, they're not part of maybe your work, like per se, like they're not your client, but maybe over the years you're working with them, you're mentoring them, that
Yeah,
sort of thing.
it's in a manner of speaking, yeah.
Yeah,
Some of them are clients and some of them are personal friends and everything in between.
sure.
I
And
think
so-
a lot of people are shy about asking for that.
Agreed.
Like, you have to really reach out to them. They're very receptive,
Mhm.
and maybe it's something that they were thinking about and wanting, but it's very difficult, I think, for a young person to approach someone at the level that you were just describing.
Right,
Someone who has now flipped into having a lot to offer
right.
is gonna seem very, very high up, very busy, and very not interested in little old me, who doesn't know a thing and just asks dumb questions and makes a lot of mistakes. So how do you bridge that sort of emotional resistance?
I think there's two parts to it. So I kind of see mentorship in business in a couple different buckets. For those of us who, it's not our business. But you have like the bucket of your employees, if you have any, right? So we build a culture in our business of mentorship. Like my goal is to make people who can basically work me out of a job at some point. That's mentorship. Like that's a cultural thing that everyone knows that in 5 years, John's gonna own the company, but maybe not be here. So he's gonna duplicate himself and all the people around him. Then there's like you were talking about, like networking, where you, someone who's been in business now 7 years, I've built a team. We've got some cool things happening. I seek people out who I see who are in places where I've been, and just offered. I'm not only offering like long-term necessarily mentorship, but I just did a lunch and learn today. Had a guy who's been in business about 5 years who's struggling with marketing. Well, I've been in a marketing coaching program for the last 3 years, and we're starting to just see the results of that. So it's like, hey, why don't we do coffee together? And I'll just share with you the things that we've been doing that have been really successful. So that'd be another bucket that's more like the collaborative bucket of maybe you know somebody who just you're just maybe 5 steps or 3 steps ahead of them. Like
Yes.
we don't. I
The
think there's a
expanders,
misconception. Like
yes.
I don't think you have to be 100 steps ahead of someone to mentor.
Mhm.
It's kind of like we've been using this terminology in this group that. But if you remember, who was it? It's the guy who was "Catch Me As You Can." Remember, or if you can't remember,
Yes,
yeah, remember
yes.
him. So they asked him. They said he was like a professor for like a year. They're like, how did you be a professor for a year and not have a degree or not be hired? He's like, I just had to be 2 steps ahead of the students.
Yeah.
Like that's how we are in business. We're literally just a couple steps ahead of each other in some ways, and we're just trying to mentor. And then there's like the mentor that I had when I was quitting my job, he was a successful CEO. He had turned around multiple businesses. He had a consulting firm, probably much like what you're talking about. And I have no clue, by the grace of God, one day he said, "Do you need help?"
Yeah.
And this is when I was still working full time. And he sat with me every Tuesday at a coffee shop
Very good.
Yeah, I love
until
that.
one day, sorry, like it's kind of emotional because it's like, it's part of my journey. He looked me in the face and literally said, "Do you realize you're making the same money part-time you are full-time at your job? What happens if you like took the step of faith? How much money would you make if you put full-time effort into your business?" And not only that, he said, "Give me a date." He wouldn't let me leave the coffee shop until I gave him a time when I was going to quit my job. There's just different levels. I think to a certain extent, if we're a little bit farther along in business, I think we have a responsibility
Love it. Yes.
to step out and just ask, "Do you need help?"
Yep.
Or be available, or just begin to present that openness. Because I think sometimes we're really busy if we have a CEO role or something similar, and sometimes people just have that perception because we're really busy, or because we've talked on stage, or we're a good public speaker or something like that, that we're not approachable.
That's so good. So that is one of my questions that I have
Sorry,
here.
I jumped ahead.
No, you're right, because you brought up 2 different things that I really wanted to touch on today. One, you brought up that we have a culture at our office, right, of mentorship. And so that was something that for me that I spent time on too. And part of that was, when I was in meetings and things like that, and when I got in front of my team. So running the blood bank, hundreds of employees, but a lot of them were frontline, you know, and they were right out of high school or a couple years out of high school or whatever. And I would always say, one of my passions is mentoring. If you want to be mentored, my door is always open. Just ask me. And I always had those that came and did that. So it's creating that culture. And just out of curiosity, how did you create that culture? And then number two, we talked about looking around. You mentioned that, right? Like pick your head up and look around. So I would love for us to talk about maybe where that might come across in our world, right? So that could be in multitude of different places. It doesn't have to be just at work. And so how do we go about and do that so that we literally have action items today that we can leave here and we can find people and make that happen? So how did you create the culture?
In my business?
Yes, like how did you create
I'm
that?
still working on it. We're not there. But like I've created two things. One, an open door policy.
Yes, love it. Yep.
I've created a culture of it's okay to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of books that people talk about, like sometimes work environments. Simon Sinek's the one who talks a lot about how really bad culture creates closed door, scared people who don't want to be confrontational.
Sure.
We had a couple glitches in our lunch and learn today. And my assistant, she didn't test a QR code. And I just had a conversation with her where it's like, hey, I'm not mad. I'm not upset. Here's what we need to do to be better. I also need you to have permission, if I'm being, Mr. Go, to tell me I can't get that done at the time you want me to.
Yeah.
Like having those like open conversations where we're not necessarily equals because I'm the CEO. I'm the one who takes on the risk. I'm the one who runs the company, all of that. But when it comes to collaboration, getting work done, we've worked really hard to create a culture of it's okay to tell the boss that he's not necessarily right.
Yeah.
I'm not right 100% of the time. So it's not necessarily a culture of mentorship as much as it's a culture of trust and building culture where people can say, hey, I don't necessarily agree with you, so we can workshop it and figure out what that's all about. That's what we've been working on. And then I'm working on, this is a real life thing, right? That's why I'm here, because I'm like, this is fascinating to me. And I know I'd pay attention more in person than if I was at my computer. I'm working on trying to build a culture of accountability. So like even at our staff meeting today, telling our guys, hey, next week, we're all gonna meet individually with me, 15 minutes. We're gonna talk about what's going well, what's not going well, how can we serve you as an employer to make sure you get the resources you need.
Yeah, and all of that you're talking about really creates approachability,
Yeah.
right? And when we have that approachability, because you were just talking, when you were saying that is, you're the big wig, like how am I gonna, right? Like in their mind, like, right? Like, I'm totally, shaken, I can't do that. And so what are our words and how do we create openness, right?
What
And
is just the
approachability.
best intake kind of? I understand you can push the message, you can
Yeah.
go to them, you can wait for them to come to you, but what's the best way to get it rolling?
So I think that one of the things, and I've been mentored over the years too, right? A ton, and that's how I scaled. And some of the ways that I saw leaders be most effective in that was the times outside of the everyday. So it was in the everyday moment, outside of the meeting, outside of outside of the conversation, the one-on-one. It was when I'm walking the halls and I'm finding, people and, hey, how are you? How are things going, John? They know your name. They know things about your family, right? They're making it a point to build connection outside of the boss role, if you will. And it's the same in my mind, like if you're a leader at a church or, maybe in a club or a group or whatever. It's that everyday moment where you're creating that, that connection of some sort. You're getting to know them, you're asking them about their lives or about their world and that sort of thing, right? Because then when you offer, or you say, do you need help or whatever, right? Now you're an approachable person. You've built a connection, right? You've gone ahead and you know their name, you know something about their life, you know about their family, you know maybe about their dreams and their goals or something, right? You're hearing about those things. And now when you say to them, hey, by the way, you know, I'm open to, I love mentoring people. If that's something you're looking for, I'm available for that. And it's like, ooh, now you're no longer that head honcho or that leader or that whatever. Now you're just Jen Hawkins. And I totally want to come in and do that, you know? And that was something for me. I use my smile a lot, right? I walk around and I talk to people and hey, how is it going? Oh my gosh, you know, how's work right now? I know it's a little crazy, like acknowledge the crazy or whatever and just be like, you know, I'm always here or whatever and just be open to that. That is for me how I do it. And how you know, you said that you were doing it a lot.
Yeah, I am, but I wanted to ask you, you had some amazing statistics here.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to know where I got them?
60% didn't receive training before the first leadership role. 82% of the managers consider themselves untrained.
Mm-hmm.
And 67% of the employees are unengaged at work.
Yep.
So how do you get leadership when you walk into a company that is suffering from these kind of pretty serious statistics? You have to start with the CEO. You have to start somewhere at the top and convince them to.
The CEO has to be on board, right?
And these people have to trust that they're going to back them up.
For sure, and that's the big piece of it, right? Because you won't have success if the leader, the top leader, doesn't buy in that training needs to happen or that the development needs to happen.
Because some of that training also is not going to come from the CEO. It's going to come from people down here.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Does the CEO trust that training will transfer?
Well, in my mind, I actually believe that coaching and development should be happening all the way through, right?
Yeah.
So that's one piece. I think a lot of executives feel like they don't need on their executive, right? Their directs need that. And it's like, I don't think we ever stop needing mentorship and expander. I call them expanders. You
Totally.
talked about people a couple of steps ahead, right?
Yeah.
I believe that you are a lifelong learner and that, right, you owe it to yourself and you owe it to the people around you and that you lead to always be expanding yourself, which means you have coaches around you, you're doing that work.
So effectively you're creating a culture.
I am creating a culture.
I think you have to be really careful if you're the business owner. You've got to hire for that at the beginning. Here's what I mean. There are people that I've met in my time of being in leadership and when I was in the business, not the ownership role, but the business role, who just didn't want it. They just didn't fit the culture. They didn't want the coaching. They just wanted to show up, do their own thing, and then be gone. And one of the things that we do in our business is when we go to look at people, we tell them this is our culture. Our culture is one where we collaborate, we work together, and we mentor. If they're like, I don't really want to be mentored, then they're not a good fit for us.
See, but I guess I see it different because I believe that you can create a culture of where employees are excited to come to work because they are being developed. And I don't think that they always know that they want it.
That's
right, because that feels really intimidating.
And they don't know all the potential either.
They don't,
in
and they don't
themselves.
even in themselves, right? And so in my mind, see, and that's where I think everyone has kind of gone to a little bit too. Like, I'm giving you a promotion, I'm hiring the best, and they should know how to do it, right? And I would argue that even at a mid-level leader, you know, you as an organization still need to be coaching and developing that mid-level leader so that they're performing and they're delivering for their people that coaching and development and that leadership that those frontline people need. So I believe that, you know, these are all skills that we learn. I think it's very rare that it's just inherent.
Totally true.
Right? I think that these are things that we're taught and and we create a culture and we teach you a process that you can use with your people to go back and coach them for performance. I also believe it's about creating a culture of getting in there with them, right? We are here to serve. If we are a leader, we are here to serve our people. That is the first, like 101, that is the groundwork,
100%.
right? And so that is where with the CEO, that's where we start, right? Where the CEO is coming in and talking to their leaders about, you know, we're here to serve and we have to model it. If I'm the CEO, I have to model that, right? I need to seek feedback. I need to be open to what you say to me. I can't just, right, be like, nope, don't care about that, or don't agree, or don't want to do it, right?
Right. So I want to pick up on something here, because this strategy is not the topic of mentorship really is a fundamental way that you approach things. So Peter Block, for instance, talks a lot about the idea that the organization structure should be that the core, the top edge of the organization should be supporting the needs of the front line.
Right.
That it should, the whole purpose, he says, of building a corporate structure is not because you achieved everything at the top, but because you have the skills to help those that are doing the work on the front lines. Because business is only successful if you are successful with your customer. And so instead of directing, and I think this is where I'm jumping off on your idea that it's a lifelong learning role. Well, one of the features of lifelong learning is always be asking questions.
Yes.
Right.
Is nothing is a statement of fact. It is a question, can we experiment? Is this something to do? And as a solopreneur, I do that with my clients. I try to actually convert my clients into mentees, in the sense that when I am brought in to do something, I'm not just there to do it as the expert, but I'm there to educate them on why it works the way it does. So I'm mentoring in my efforts. Yes, there's times I have to sit there and get it done, but then I stop and say, now let me show you how it works. So the next time you do it, and to me, that's been a client retention tool, because they always know that I'm not there just to hold everything to myself and they owe me if they want to run their business. Instead, I'm there to figure something out that they're not capable of doing on their own, and then prepare them to do it for themselves next time.
Sure, and that's really what we're trying to do with our employees too, right? And really help them in that, right? And understanding that, so that they can be independent, so they understand the philosophies, right? Why is this our vision? Why are we moving in this direction? Come to me when you have great ideas, right? That are different than collaboration, right? Share those. We have that mentality here of a collaboration, open door policy. You can bring those great ideas, right? So it's that almost like a team and a partnership in that, right?
And you can only bring it if there's a trust factor working.
Agreed, right? And you're right, now I could go into an organization and I could train the new leader and the mid-level leaders all on the coaching and development process that I use, that is tried and true across 5 industries, top results, right? And I know and have street cred on that. And then I also could teach them how to be outstanding leaders. But you're right, if the CEO has a culture of it's a top-down world, my way or the highway, right? Consent decree environment, the things that I'm doing, right, to teach that leadership, to teach that collaboration, to show them how to serve, that's going to be that's going to be like contradictory to what their CEO
let's be
wants,
honest, too.
right? And that
also,
will be a problem.
It's also a really bad growth strategy.
Agreed.
Okay, if you're trying to grow a business, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room as the CEO.
Agreed.
You should be the not the dumbest person in the room, but you should be building a culture where the people around you are capable of doing things you can't. Like I'm in the IT world, so that's really easy for me. Like I look for guys who know how to do things I don't. And I constantly am looking, and that's why like when we hire, kind of like what I was saying, we look at culture. We try to hire. I'd rather hire a person who fits into like what we're trying to build from a cultural standpoint, and then send them to classes.
Right, exactly.
But at the
Yeah.
for
'Cause
the
you can
tech
teach
side,
that.
because I can teach that. That's easy. I can teach somebody how to build a server or
Sure.
whatever. But I can't teach people how to be like go-getters. You can, some people, but there's a lot of traits in them. But the thing that I guess my point was that I've lost my point now.
Well,
My
I
brain
think,
stopped
you know,
working.
and to talk about that, right, part of it too, when you're looking at building a team is what skill sets am I missing, right?
What
Because
exactly, that's right.
not everybody can be the go-getter. We need some people that are like very detail oriented, right? And they zero in like laser focus, right? And that sort of thing. So really, what do we have on our team? But in terms of the CEO or the leader, they need to be open to the gifts and the talents of everyone on the team too. Just because you're the leader, you're there setting the vision, right? If we're going out on the trip, you're kind of like, here's where we're going, right? This is what we're doing. But everyone else might have the tools and the maps and right and all the stuff. They're bringing all that with it so that we get there. You know, someone's thinking about, do we have supplies? Somebody's thinking, do we know the route, right? Everybody's got something different. The leader just said, we need to get from here to Alaska. Right? That's the goal. That's what we're driving for. That's what's going to make the organization successful. Now let's collaborate. Now let's bring it all together.
And that's
right?
where you get maybe not a go-getter, maybe go-getter's not the right word, because there's people that I've worked for who maybe don't appear to be a go-getter, but when you give them a task that's right within their wheelhouse, they can zone in like no one's business to build out what you need to get to. They can build out from A to B with each step. I'm not wired that way. So you've got to find the people who are missing like what you have. If you're a visionary, you got to find people who can help make the vision happen.
Yeah. Yep.
Right?
So I was thinking too, just with your comments about the go-getter and finding that, and earlier you'd asked, how do we find people to mentor?
Right.
And my brain, again, I've got 4 kids, they're all pretty young still, but I'm like, they're right in front of me.
Right.
And as this conversation has gone on, you know, what are we setting up this generation of kids when they get into the workforce to expect? Are we setting them up to expect the training? Are we setting them up to expect that, no, they can ask for the things that they need to be successful?
Yes.
Because if we're not doing that to this young generation, then they're not going to. They're going to be where they get into the workforce, then they're just frustrated because they're not getting what they need.
That's so true.
So more than finding the go-getters or finding the people, just let people know that, that you get to ask. It's important for you to ask for help.
Yes.
Yeah, because some people don't know, and they might be that person that, quoting Aladdin here, diamond in the rough, right?
Right.
They just don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how do we teach them what they don't know?
Right. And I think that's great, right? As parents, we really sit down with that. I will tell you, I was that weird parent that role played with my kids. But I also, I knew how effective it was. And so when my kids were like struggling, and so I would sit down and say, let's talk about how that conversation's probably going to go. Let's role play it.
Yeah.
And my kids loved it because I taught them that you definitely want to do it with me before you do it out on the playground. Trust me, I'm not judging you, right? And just really have that conversation. I taught them how to shake hands. We taught them how to look people in the eye and do those things. Again, those are not inherent skills typically, right? They're learned. And so how do we do that? And so it really does go back to us, and it does start with us. I don't disagree on that at all.
I had a conversation with a young person not too long ago, and it came down to where they were telling me that they were going to leave their job and go somewhere else. And I said, "Why are you leaving to go somewhere else?" "Well, I don't feel like they're going to give me a raise. I don't feel like they're going to give me more responsibility. I just don't feel that they like me. I just don't feel it."
Yeah.
I said, "How much concentrated time have you put on adding value to the business you're working for?" and the blank stare came up. Because I said, why don't we just reverse engineer this a little bit? And why don't you start thinking about all of the different ways you could probably contribute to this business when you go home tonight, do research on their marketing, find out what they're doing,
Right.
get yourself involved in this thing and start creating more value. Because the person who hired you isn't gonna spend any more money on you than they absolutely have to find out whether or not you're gonna work out. So make sure you're adding value so that you can make some different decisions. If you wanna leave after that, then fine, go.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great conversation. And I would also, just double down on the fact that I believe good leaders and good frontline, that newer leader, that frontline leader, and up through that mid-level leader is having those kind of conversations with people, right? When they have the skill set to truly lead. And then there's the joy in the work, right? So then we go from 67% unengaged employees to very engaged, because now you've given me something that I can go home, something tangible, something concrete, that's really going to help me be effective at the workplace and enjoy what I'm doing, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's the piece that's missing. So you inspired this younger person, right? And help them figure out how to carve success for themselves. And I would, say that when you have the training as a leader, as that newer leader and that mid-level leader, you learn how to do that. And you're having those conversations regularly. You're having, inspiring one-on-ones. You're having huddles in the morning, right? So you're level setting and you're talking to the groups in the morning if you have a team. All of that is happening, right? You're having goal sessions with them every week to drive performance. And that is all about the strategy of them. How are you, employee, going to have success this week? This conversation is all about you. My undivided attention for you. And then the huddle in the morning is all about undivided attention for the team. How are we rowing in the same direction? What are we doing collectively to have success? And then casting the future vision, right? Guys, this is where we're at. And the good leaders know how to be up on the balcony. I'm casting vision. I'm seeing what's going on. And then I'm back on the dance floor. I'm helping that out. But that is all trained, right? And so if our CEOs aren't driving that culture and investing, then where are new and mid-level leaders getting it from? Where's the mentorship?
I think part of investment, I'm realizing this as we're talking, is also being aware enough to figure out the types of personalities that you have. So
yes.
Mike McCallum has a really good book. I think it's his All-In book, where he talks about he even has it's the craziest thing. He has this idea of not a directory, but like a person dictionary. So people fill out personality tests, they figure out different things about themselves, and they put that in a place where coworkers and the leadership can actually see it. So you can kind of figure out, some people don't want to talk about their personal lives at work. But some people, if you just have that 2-minute conversation with them, it makes their day and they're like, I'm back to work, let's get going.
Yeah.
And taking that time to figure out who fits in what box and then lead the way that they need to be.
Yeah.
Because I've got some polar opposite people in our business. And so it's a matter of, okay, I know this person, I approach it this way, this person, I approach it this way. It's not leadership's definitely, when it comes to personality, is not a one size fits all.
No, I would agree.
And you definitely have to adapt into their personality and what their needs are as people.
I have a question for the speaker. How do we become better mentors ourselves? And by we, I mean I.
So, I think,
I have my limits, I'm just
well,
one
you're an
person.
expander though, right? So I talked about that a few minutes ago in terms of, so if we are all, I'm here right now, right? And maybe I'm that younger, newer leader, or maybe I'm just an employee and I have aspirations for getting there, but I have no idea how to get there. And I come to you. It's really, talk to me, what about me were you looking for? What were you hoping to get out of our relationship and our conversations? And have them share with you, well, gosh, you are so knowledgeable about law. And I'm struggling in that. I don't know where the resources are. I never know where to look. Right now you have something tangible to sit down with them and say, you're right, that is definitely my sweet spot. Let's talk about, a plan going forward of when we're gonna meet and what we're gonna double down on. Is it, maybe you're in criminal law, whatever, right? And your boss expects you to come with, cases for XYZ. We're going to talk about that specifically. What is it? So I think really asking them, what attracted you to working with me? Why did you seek me out? I think it's just like when I talk to my staff, right? How can I serve you today? What are your obstacles? What's happening right now? I'm very specific because I want to dig into what are the problems you're experiencing. I'm really here to solve. I'm really here to serve. And it is my job as leader to remove an obstacle. Well, I do feel like as mentor, it's definitely my job to zero in on what you need because like you said, they all need something different.
Yeah.
They all want it differently, right? Because we're people, we're individuals. And I think we spoke about last week how our younger generation really takes pride in their individualism, right? So what am I getting and what am I looking for and how do we ask the questions? And I think that's really what it is. We talked about, are we picking our heads up? Are we looking around? Are we looking for those people and that opportunity? And sometimes it might be you really actually know what they need because you saw it for yourself and you walked up to them and said, you know what? I think that I saw that was a bit of a struggle. I want to offer my services to you. I really want to help you with that. How is that going for you? What's happening right now? And just opening up the dialogue, but we shouldn't be afraid to do it. And I think that we're as uncomfortable as they are.
Totally true.
And so we avoid it. And that's part of the problem. And our younger adults and our youth are not being developed. And it's
For sure.
right? It's a real problem. And then we sit around, we complain about it. We can't do that.
Yeah.
Right? We can't complain about it, right? So that's kind of what we're left with. That was a really good question.
And an idea that I was introduced to this week that I think speaks to that, but it's been rattling around my brain all week and then during this conversation. Clarity is kindness.
Yes.
And I think that I've even experienced this where I've taken somebody under my wing, so to speak, and I know what I'm doing. Like, let's take real estate as a very cut and dried. I know real estate. I've been doing it long enough. I know how it works. I'm very fluent in my operation of it. And this particular individual that I'm picturing came along and I was mentoring him and I didn't have a lot of clarity in where I was taking him.
Okay.
And I didn't have clarity there was a lot going on and but it didn't and I do believe that I offered him some, like, he came away with some skills and some things, but like really getting down to the focus and even, in a conversation setting like this, like I could just start rambling and going on and on.
Yeah.
But if I really I even just love how clear and concise clarity is kindness. And then,
Yeah.
Right.
and then let that feedback come back.
Right.
And like, how did that land for you? How, just kind of getting that back and forth. And this is, I mean, we're talking organizationally, but I mean, this is for everything. This is your kids, your relationship with a spouse, your relationship with a buddy. Like, how do you take, and even like exploring, I am mentoring and being mentored. And frequently in the same conversation, Zane and I'm gonna pick on you. We've had coffee once, right?
Yeah.
We got together, we met, and then we're like, and like there was just so much that was exchanged in that moment where I learned things that I was like,
Yeah.
and I feel like maybe some transfer
Yeah,
was
there was some of that.
yeah, okay, good. So yeah, and Mandy, I want to hear from you because I haven't heard from you at
Well,
all.
I really love what you're saying because I think that is super important, being very reciprocal, because it's not always that exchange of that, in a very like visual perspective. I'm here, you're here. Even somebody who's at the very beginning of their experience, that fresh perspective has a lot to offer as well. So I think entering into it of, sure, there's things that I've learned maybe through hard knocks that I can offer you for free, and just having that spirit of, I have things to offer, but I'm also very curious. even talking to a 5-year-old of, like, there's probably something here that's a gem for me, right? Like,
Yes.
so I think,
true?
and I think even that spirit allows people to lose a little bit of that apprehension, because if you tell them something that you've learned from them, I think it opens them up right away to be more, well, okay, could you explain this to me?
Yes.
So, kind of honoring people. And then also something that stuck out to me throughout this entire conversation is when you think of the dichotomy of how many large corporations are gobbling up mom and pops and how difficult it is, how much of that is happening. And when we talk about how necessary it is for the CEO, for the buy-in at the top, otherwise it's very much working against the culture, which is not impossible, but tiresome. And I think that that's what a lot of us are dealing with, because we are losing that. So I think voting with your dollars, making sure that as a culture, we're wanting to know more than that you just have the best price. We want to know, how do you treat your employees? How do they act? And then we respond accordingly, because we're losing that. And then, how many people are just a one-man show? So we need to be looking for people. We need to take it on just as a civic responsibility. So why I love what you're saying, because I think it's so important.
Yeah, I love that. Those are such great points. Yes, so much. And tell me, anyone that has mentored in this room, you walked away. I think when we were talking last week, it was like, I learned as
so
much, right?
out of it.
We talk about that.
I
Yes,
started a
it's
little
the best.
group. I saw a need at an agency, and I started a little group, and I gave it a dumb name, DOR, which was the name of our agency, DOR, Lawyers of Tomorrow. Because there was a lot of people working there, and some of them wanted to become lawyers. And so we would meet completely virtually, because it was statewide, and we would have a speaker come in who was an attorney in the agency, and they would talk about their journey, because everybody's journey is different. And they could drop in by Zoom, so it worked okay. And then I was already an attorney. And so one of the mentees in the group, and one of the mentees in the group actually conferenced her son, who's in high school, into our group, because he was thinking maybe, and all are welcome, of course. I mean, as long as the parent is in the call, we don't want unaffiliated children, but so I was, saying what my goal was. One of the mentees said, well, what do you want, And I said, well, I would like to teach at whatever, because when I left California, I left my teaching position, and I missed it. And I said, I'm having trouble breaking in. I respond to ads, I send unsolicited, I call, I do everything I can think of. I have a terrific background. I just can't find that open window, And one of the mentees said, oh, I know the person. And yes, my resume, right. And so it wasn't, for me, a lawyer of tomorrow, it was a law professor of tomorrow. But there probably was some value to that 18-year-old who was in these calls, who didn't speak much, but probably just drank it all in, and it's in there somewhere.
Right.
And when he needs those messages, they'll be there. And so I don't know exactly what every single person's path was or would be, but I can tell you, every single person, when they talked about their goals, it was all becoming a lawyer, but it was all different.
Yeah.
Really, really varied and surprising.
Yeah.
You did not get answers that you were expecting. And it was difficult for us because it is a big state and we were statewide. And maybe you can give some advice on how to manage a sprawling mentoring setup like that, because all we had literally was Zoom.
So we'll have to have you back on.
I knew you were gonna
There's so many threads also that I want to pull on here that I'm like, we definitely need to keep this conversation going. And in fact, this is a big part of the vision that I have for this group, is that a rising tide raises all ships.
Yes.
And if we show up with contribution in mind, but also with a little bit of like, hey, I'm going to call you out on something. And I actually like the expression, call you up.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not calling you out. I'm not going to make, you're blah, 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 especially in front of everybody, but like, hey, I noticed that, you used this, and I've noted, that kind of, but anyway, there's so many threads that we could go on. I do want to shout out, next week we have Steve Hicks, health and wellness coach. He'll be here to share with us.
Fantastic.
And Mike is.
One more thing, Gary, introduce yourself.
I didn't want to put you on the spot. Mike, thank you for putting him on the spot.
My name is Gary Canavello, And I am a liaison to different companies that promote, well, services. Like what I would like to do is somehow help people get involved in probably advertising for themselves, maybe, because I know people that are in the business of recording and scripting and things like that turn into film, which turn into like commercials. You know, hi, I'm so and so, and I'm what do you do, and this is what I. That's pretty helpful to see that on the big screen.
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm kind of interested in that. I'm not promoting myself really. I'm kind of I love films, and I promote films that are like the ones that are coming out. You know, real like right now. There's one with Ben Affleck, and he already did a prequel of his what's it called? Kind of The Accountant Part 2. Yeah, and The Accountant Part 1 was a phenomenal movie. You know, things like that. We like to promote that kind of stuff, and so that's what I'm here for. It's not, it's kind of weird because I haven't done this much, but I'm ready. I'm ready to try as whatever I can do.
Awesome.
So if anybody wants any input or to give me any constructive criticism, I love to take constructive criticism.
All right.
Love it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm sure you guys learned something today, and that's called value. And because of that, you should like this video. Remember that sharing is caring. I want you guys to also check out Jennifer's links in the video description below. Be sure to give her some page ranking. I'll see you next time, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.
Jennifer, thank you so much. It was so helpful.
Thank you.
Awesome.
You
Yeah,
guys are
thank
so
you,
nice.
everybody.
Thank you.
Free photo shoot if anybody wants to get headshots, and we will see everybody next week when Steve Hicks joins us. That's a wrap.
Yeah.